to welcome Mark Sussman as our master class presenter. You all know him as our Director of Parenting Resources. He has worked in the parenting field for many years, first in private practice before joining Maxi in 2020. He also worked in the financial industry earlier in his career on Wall Street in New York City for several years before moving into the parenting field. Whether it's coaching people on their finances, if anyone needs any finance help, go to Mark, or their parenting, his career has always revolved around coaching. Mark, from my heart, it's a pleasure working with you. And I feel honored to have you as our master class presenter talking about the fundamental principles of coaching. Everyone put up your thumbs to welcome Mark. Mark, I'm passing you the baton.
Thank you so much, Susan, for that wonderful introduction. I appreciate that. I should probably stop because it's downhill from here, but I should just go with that and let what you say about me just stay, but I'll stick around for a few minutes. So here we go. When Susan and I were collaborating, first of all, thank you all of you for being here today and indulging me to hear a few words from me. I really appreciate that as well. When Susan and I were collaborating on this particular masterclass, so we had an idea as far as writing up an intro, and then we kind of went back and forth as should we send it out as an email, should it be said here? Then we sort of went back and forth, should Susan say it, should I say it? And we finally settled that I'll say it. So what I decided to do is, since this part was written already, I'm going to actually read you the intro, and then from then we'll go right into the talk that we're going to have. So here's the intro. The art of coaching has always intrigued me. Long before I made coaching my career choice, first in the financial field, coaching people on their finances, and then in the parenting field, coaching people on their parenting. And even while I was still a teenager, I was always intrigued by the psychology of coaching. However, to be truthful, my first love, even from a very young age, was sports. I loved to play sports and began following sports when I was only 4 years old. I taught myself how to read at the age of 4 because in those days, the Toronto Star was delivered at 4 p.m., but my father did not come home from work until around 6 p.m. Not wanting to wait until he came home to find out if the Leafs had actually won the night before, I taught myself how to read. By the time my father came home, not only did I know the score of the game and who had scored each of the goals, I was also able to tell him all the details as I had already read the article about it. As I got a little older, it wasn't simply about following my favorite teams, but it also became about understanding the coaches and their strategies as to how it helped propel their teams to victory. So when the idea was put forth to do a masterclass on the art of coaching, I figured what better way for all of us coaches to study our amazing craft than through the eyes of legendary sports coaches. I believe you'll find the time that we spend on it both interesting and informative. I am Mark Sussman, lifelong and long-suffering Leafs fan, and this is my masterclass. With that intro, let's get into what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk about the fundamental principles of coaching. And we're going to focus on 3 of them as we get into our talk. Now, just to give you what my hope, obviously everyone can have their objective, what they would like to gain or what they would like to take from today's talk. But I want to tell you what my hope is. My hope is to give all of you the mirror of what you do every single day when you are coaching children at Maxi. Because as coaches, you are in the trenches with those children one-to-one working on them. And from that viewpoint, not sitting up on the ledge and getting to see yourselves, it sometimes can be hard to actually realize what you actually do and how amazing it is what you actually do. So I'm hoping to give you that mirror into your own coaching through what I am going to share today about other legendary sports coaches. Now, what you do, as I said, is truly amazing. You are literally changing lives, building generations, frankly, what is going to come from all these children. And I want to share with you a quote from a legendary sports coach who we are going to talk about more in a few minutes from now. But I want to share this quote just up top. Here's this quote. A good coach can change a game. A great coach can change a life. Yes, great coaches, they don't just win games, they don't just win championships, but they are literally shaping the lives of all their players, not just on the court, but off the court as well. Now, when we talk about the essence of coaching, which is kind of what we're going to talk about today, There are two parts that go into that. There is the technical part of coaching. In Maxi, that's the things that you are doing with all the children, the exercise, the music, the video games, all those things. I'm not going to talk about that. Frankly, you don't need my input on that anyways. But I'm going to focus on the other part, which is the foundational principles of coaching. Because frankly, like everything in life, if you build that foundation correctly, if that foundation is solid, then whatever technical ability, and whether it's Maxi coaching, whether it's sports coaching, whether it's any other coaching, whatever you build on top of that, that's going to hold, that's going to stay, that's going to last. But if you build and the foundation is not really there or is kind of weak, well, ultimately, it's sort of like building on sand or sort of like a house of cards. It'll ultimately collapse back on top of itself. So with that in mind, that we're going to focus on those principles. Okay, first thing we need to figure out, if we're going to talk about sports coaches, which sport? So my first thought was, you know what, let's take a coach from different sports. We could take one from basketball, maybe one from hockey, one from football, soccer, baseball, whatever those different sports are. But then I thought, you know what, let's keep it to one sport. That might narrow it and make it a little sort of easier to kind of focus it if we just focus on one particular sport. So I was like, okay, which sport? So the sport I chose was the sport of college basketball in the United States. Now, in a moment, I'm going to actually share with you, because I want you to understand the coaches that we're going to talk about, how legendary they actually are. So I'm going to explain to you the scope of the sport in the United States, so to sort of give you that picture. But before I do that, I want to tell you two reasons why I chose college basketball specifically. Reason number one, professional sports coaches, they're coaching players in their 20s, 30s, sometimes into their early 40s. That's kind of out of the range of what we're doing here at Maxi, where the kids are generally between about 5, 6 up to 18. So that's like a little bit off. It might not necessarily correlate exactly. But college basketball, well, the 4 years that those players are playing college basketball, those are between the years generally of 18 to 21. So those first 2 years especially, they're freshman and sophomore years, 18 and 19 years old, teenagers still kind of close to what we do here. So that was reason number one. Reason number two was because I took a look at college basketball and said, hey, you know the way it works today is the real good players, although technically college is for 4 years, but the real good players, they show up for their freshman season. And at the end of that freshman season, they declare for the NBA draft to get drafted a couple of months later in June and go play professional basketball. So they come to college at about September when the year starts. The college basketball season generally ends around late March, early April. They leave at that point to go train and prepare for the NBA draft. So they're basically with that coach in that school for about 7 to 8 months. And that's kind of what we do here. You take a 60-session course, twice a week sessions, you're doing roughly about 8 months. So not only did the age of the college basketball players kind of correlate to what we do here in pretty close, but in addition to that, the amount of time that these coaches coach some of these players is exactly identical to the amount of time that you're coaching all the children that you coach at Maxi. So that's how we arrived at college basketball. As I said a minute ago, I'm going to share with you the scope of college basketball in the United States, how large it actually is. Now, here in Canada, there is what they call U sports, university sports, and they're kind of a big deal. But it pales in comparison to what sports is in the United States, college basketball, specifically college basketball and college football, absolutely huge in the United States. To give you an understanding, all these large universities all over the US, there are several hundred of them, they don't play in these on-campus gyms where there's 300, 500, 1,000 people maybe watching them play. They play in arenas. Sometimes they're on campus, sometimes they're off campus, 20,000 seat arenas, similar to like the Scotiabank Arena here in Toronto, 20,000 seats. And they sell out every single game. Not only that, the College Basketball National Championship, which is played every year in March and then culminates in early April, which is what they call March Madness. Their championship weekend, which is known as the Final Four, that is played not in an arena, in a football style stadium, 70, 80,000 fans. They sell out every ticket. And frankly, if there'd be an arena or a stadium that had 250,000 seats, they'd probably sell that out as well. That's how huge it is. Now, to give you a specific example to show you how it's almost like part of the culture within these universities. So there was a university out there called Duke University. It's in North Carolina. Their men's college basketball team has been one of the most well-known and really decorated college basketball programs over the last 30 years. Their coach, who we're not going to talk about today in a few moments, but I just want to bring him up here. Their coach is named Mike Krzyzewski. He's been there for the last 30, 35 years, actually retired at the end of this season in early April. Duke plays in an on-campus arena called Cameron Indoor Stadium, and they do something really interesting. One side of that entire stadium, those tickets are reserved just for the students. And there's only one rule. If you want to sit in the student section, you're not allowed to sit. You come in, you stand, you jump up and down, you scream the whole game. Not a single student will sit for the entire game. The way those tickets are sold is very interesting. They don't sell those tickets before the season. You can go buy them. They are sold on the day of the game. So 9 a.m., morning of a game, tickets go on sale. Students can line up to purchase those seats. As many as they are, they'll keep on selling them. And students really wanted to get those seats. So what they did was they started showing up maybe a few hours earlier, 5, 6 in the morning. Then as the lines got longer, they started to show up maybe at midnight. Then they started to show up the day before, 2 days before, 3 days before, 72 hours before a game. Thousands of students were there in this large open field next to Cameron Indoor Stadium, pitching tents and sleeping bags to have a chance to purchase a ticket for a Duke basketball game. It got so out of hand that the school finally made a rule. You can't show up until 24 hours before. Now that open area where the students kind of made their own little village there, they gave it its own name. They named it after their coach. It's known as Krzyzewskiville. That's how big a deal college basketball is in the United States. They'll show up literally, well, now it's only 24 hours before, but 3 days before, just to have a chance to purchase a ticket to see their beloved Blue Devils play a game. So with that in mind, and with understanding the scope of college basketball, let's get into the 3 principles that we're going to talk about, as well as the 3 coaches. We are going to focus on one coach for each of these principles. 3 principles are very simple. I'm going to give you 3 short phrases to remember them by. Number 1, be a role model to them. Number 2, believe in them. Number 3, have patience with them. Again, really quickly, be a role model to them, believe in them, and have patience with them. The 3 coaches that we are going to use today, the legendary coaches, are a coach by the name of John Wooden, who was the head coach for many, many years at UCLA, the UCLA Bruins. The second coach is a coach by the name of Jim Valvano. He was the head coach at NC State, North Carolina State University, which is known as the Wolfpack. The third coach is Pat Summitt. She was the head coach for over 30 years at Tennessee University, the Tennessee Volunteers, affectionately known to all their fans as the Lady Vols. Let's take the first one first. Be a role model to them. The coach we're going to use for this one is John Wooden. Let me tell you about John Wooden so you can understand how legendary a coach and a person he actually was. As I mentioned, he was the head coach at UCLA, University California at Los Angeles, known as the Bruins. His coaching record is astounding. During his career, his teams won 885 games while only losing 203, a winning percentage of 81%. He coached for many years. But during the years between 1964 and 1975, he did something that was absolutely astounding. During those 12 seasons, his UCLA Bruins won 10 national championships, the best team in college basketball, 10 of those 12 years, including at one point 7 in a row. To put it in perspective, in the entirety of any other coach's career, the most national championships that any coach has ever won in men's college basketball is 5. He doubled that total in a span of 12 years. Now, interestingly enough, as great as he was a coach, he was equally great as a person. His style in the 60s and 70s was very different than most coaches during that era. Coaching in those days was really about driving the players hard, and that whole sort of almost like the boot camp military type style is how most coaches coached back in those days. John Wooden didn't coach like that. He treated his players with respect. He just taught them, perhaps as a teacher would, always explaining to them, not raising his voice, not getting upset at them, constantly coaching, teaching, coaching. And as interested as he was in them as players, he was interested in the same way as them as people. All his players years after they left, came back to speak to him, not just about basketball, but about life. In addition to that, once he retired, he wrote books about leadership and coaching. He was consulted not just by his players, by CEOs, by political world leaders, would consult and speak with John Wooden to learn about his leadership style and his coaching style. And as a matter of fact, the award given in college basketball, sort of the Lifetime Achievement Coaching Award given in college basketball to college basketball coaches, is named after him. It's the John R. Wooden Legend of Coaches Award. And to show how great he was as a person as well, as I mentioned, in 2003, from then President George W. Bush, he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is the highest civilian honor granted in the United States. So that's who John Wooden was. Wonderful coach, wonderful person. So we're going to use him to talk about the principle of being a role model. And I'm going to share a quote of his, a 6-word quote of his that is short, poignant, and powerful. Here's the quote. Young people need models, not critics. Again, let that sink in. Young people need models, not critics. Now think of it this way. Of course, coaching is all about teaching the technical aspects, whatever you're coaching, whether it's Maxi, whether it's basketball. That's part of what you need to do. But before you can deliver any technical aspects, no matter how great you might be at that, the first thing is that child or that teenager sitting across from you, you've got to figure out how to open that door. If they don't let you in, all your great techniques are never going to get to where they need to get. And what John Wooden is telling us is the way to open that door is by being that role model, being that person that those children look up to, want to be like, want to emulate, and then trust to open their door, to let you in, to deliver all those techniques that they hope to be able to teach you. And to contrast that, let's take that other word in his quote. Young people, he said, don't need critics. Well, let's talk about what a critic is. And let's take the word critics, actually. We're going to play with the word critics. I know it's not going to be the correct spelling, but phonetically, it sounds the same. If we take the word critics and we change some of those letters around, it becomes crickets. That phrase, hearing crickets, hearing nothing, that's what happens when you are a critic. That person sitting across from you is not going to hear anything that you're saying because they will not open that door. Not now, not next week, not next month, maybe not ever. The way to open that door, the way to get that door to open up to a child, to a teenager, is by being the role model, the image that you present, the way that you deal with them, the way that you speak to them, the way that you care about them. You do that, that door will open. And then your ability to deliver all the wonderful technical coaching that you're capable of, those children are going to literally eat it up. Now, to give you a picture of, from my own life, someone that did that for me, I want to go back to when I was 10 years old. I want to share something about myself and bring a person into the story that was that role model to me. I was 10 years old and I'm a stutterer. And well, technically I am, because they say that we're never cured. So I guess I'm still a stutterer. I was 10 years old and my parents told me that I'm going to be going for speech therapy. And I went to Sick Children's Hospital where I actually took speech therapy for 4 years between the ages of 10 and 13. My speech therapist was a woman by the name of Penny Watson. She was the lead speech therapist at the time at Sick Children's Hospital. I want to share with you 2 stories about her. Here's the first one. The way I started being Penny Watson's patient, because frankly, it was really hard to get into her. She had a long waiting list. But in the summer, when I was 10 years old, she decided, together with her staff and some student speech pathology interns, to create essentially a speech therapy camp. All of them with about 8 or 10 of us children. We would come every day, Monday to Friday, from 10 a.m. to about 3, 4 p.m. to the speech therapy camp. It was a lot of fun because not only did they teach us techniques, but they did all kinds of fun activities around it to make the speech therapy part of it really, really fun. Well, here's what happened on the first Friday of the speech therapy camp. She let us know that on Friday, what we were going to do every Friday after lunch, we were going to have movie day. We were all going to watch a movie together, the old in those VHS tape days. We were going to watch a movie. And after the movie, we were going to have a discussion. And that would give us a chance to practice the techniques we had learned that week, that day, And so we started watching a movie. I believe, if I remember correctly, that first week we might have watched Swiss Family Robinson. We watched the movie, and as the movie starts, she took out a box of cookies and started walking around offering each of us cookies that she had purchased for us to eat during the movie. When she got to me, I had to let her know that I would love to have the cookies, but unfortunately, since I'm kosher, I won't be able to have. But I told her it's fine. My mother had sent many snacks. I had plenty to eat. She felt really bad. She apologized to me at the moment, and I thought, okay, that's it. Well, that wasn't the end of that. Later that day, after camp was over, she called up my mother and told her she felt so bad. What she wanted to know from my mother was to give her a name and an address of a kosher bakery so that for the following Friday, she could pick up cookies that I would be able to eat as well. My mother told her, she was downtown, Sick Children's Hospital. She lived in the downtown area as well. My mother explained to her that closest kosher bakery is about a half hour away. My mother said, I'll pick them up. I'll send them with Mark. And she said, no. Each child I see today likes different types of cookies. So I want to be able to go so I could pick out myself. So this way, each child gets the cookies that they like. And that's what she did. The following Friday, she went up to, I believe it was Isaac's Bakery, picked up those cookies early in the morning, came back down before speech therapy camp. And as we started the movie, she takes out the box, which had the Isaac's Bakery name on the box, comes over to me with the cookies, and now I was able to have. In that moment, Penny Watson became my role model, not because of any speech therapy technique or anything to help me with my stuttering, because of the person that she was, the care, the concern, the compassion. That moment, I remember thinking, wow, that's someone that I want to be like. And you know what? That's someone, obviously, that I'd be willing to open that door to let her in to teach me what she really needed to teach me, not about cookies and movies, but about techniques to help me with my stuttering. That's the first story. I want to share with you a second story. It was about a few days into that speech therapy camp, and what they would do is after we would learn certain techniques, we would break off into one-to-one and practice that technique. So that's what I was doing. I was practicing this technique with one of these speech therapy student interns, and I was having difficulty mastering it, and I got frustrated. I may or may not have been crying, but we're not going to talk about that. She went to get Penny Watson, and Penny Watson came in, saw me with tears on my face, and said, "Hey, Mark, come, let's go for a walk." And so we walked out of the room, we walked down the hall, we went to the elevator, we went down the elevator to the lobby of Sick Children's Hospital, and we walked out onto the sidewalk and started to walk. And she started talking with me, started asking me questions about my family, about my friends, about my school, about what I like, about what I don't like. Nothing to do with speech therapy, nothing to do with what just had happened upstairs in that room. We walked for about two blocks, and we came upon a convenience store. Obviously, she knew that was going to be there. She said, "Hey, it's a hot summer day. Let's go get some ice cream." And so we went inside and we each picked out an ice cream. Yes, there was some kosher ice cream choices. So we each picked out an ice cream, and we walked back outside and continued to walk around the streets of downtown Toronto for about 20 more minutes while we ate our ice creams. Again, walking and talking, nothing at all to do with speech therapy. About a half hour after we had left the hospital, we came back upon the hospital. We went upstairs and she said, "Hey, let's try it again." And in a matter of moments, that same techniques that had frustrated me to tears a half hour earlier, I mastered it really, really quickly. The role model. She could have, when we talk about role models versus critics, she could have said, "Hey, Mark, come on, why can't you get it? What's the big deal? Just come on. Why are you crying? There's no crying in speech therapy. Just come on, get it done." She didn't say one word. She took me downstairs. She allowed me to calm down. She took an interest in me, talking about me and all about me. That was the role model. And I think back to that moment when you talk about critics, had she maybe gone the other way in that moment and been a little hard on me, even if she meant well, trying to kind of motivate me or push me, but had she done that, not only wouldn't I have let her in or her team in, I may have never let anyone else in to allow them to help me with my stuttering. And I might not be here today talking to you, or I might be talking to you and it would be a lot harder for all of you to understand me because I'd be stammering and stuttering and umming my way through this speech. That's what role models do versus what critics do. Now, if you're wondering, okay, well, great, be a role model, but she really wasn't there to be my role model. She was there to help me with my stuttering. So how did that go? Did that work out? Because if it didn't, then maybe we got to rethink, well, really nice to be a role model, but you got to teach what you got to teach. So I'm going to fast forward from that summer when I was 10 years old, about 3.5 years later. I was 3 months after my 12th birthday. My 13th birthday was coming up in 9 months. On my 13th birthday was going to be my bar mitzvah. In addition to the celebration that happens around that, there is an expectation. The expectation is that at that bar mitzvah, you get up in front of your congregation and you deliver a speech. In my case, that meant my synagogue, about 200 plus families as members, men, women, children, meant I was going to be speaking that day in front of probably 400 to 500 people. We were having a conversation 3 months after my 12th birthday at one of my Thursday 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. sessions. I was sitting on a chair kind of off on the side, and she was by her desk, and I told her, this bar mitzvah's coming up, and obviously I need to give this speech, and I told her in no unequivocal terms, it will not happen. She got up from her chair. She took her chair with her. She put that chair right in front of me. She looked into my eyes, sitting as close as I am to this screen. That's how close she was to me. And she said, "It will happen. You will do this, and we are going to do this together." She then told me that starting from the next week, I should bring that speech along with me. And every week for the next 9 months, we spent 15 minutes on my session going over that speech. 9 months later, on the day of my bar mitzvah, there I was standing up in front of the whole congregation, 400 to 500 people, yes, with Penny Watson in the audience as well. And I'm not here to talk about how great I am. I'm here to talk about how great she was. I spoke for 10 minutes. It was flawless. I didn't even stutter once. You want to know what role models do? You want to know what role models achieve? You want to know what role models accomplish? That. You open your door to that role model. You want to be like them. You want to learn from them. You want to emulate them. Maybe even want to make them proud. And then whatever those technical aspects that need to be taught, that need to be coached, child is wide open to take all that in. That's what being a role model is all about. John Wooden to his players, Penny Watson to me, and each and every one of you. As I said, I want to give you that picture. Each and every one of you doing that same thing to every single one of your children or teenagers that you are coaching. You are exactly doing what John Wooden does, what Penny Watson does. You could put you right at the end of that sentence in big capital letters, YOU. That's all of you as well. That's what being a role model is all about. That's our first section. Let's move on to our second section, which is believe in them, the second foundational principle of coaching. The coach I want to bring in for this is a coach by the name of Jim Valvano. In this section, we are going to talk about his basketball coaching. Keep that name in mind, because at the end of our talk, I'm going to come back to him again to talk about something he did outside of basketball that I think far exceeds anything that he did in basketball, and his basketball accomplishments were pretty great. Jim Valvano was the head coach, as I mentioned, is known for being the head coach during the 1980s at NC State, North Carolina State University, the Wolfpack. In 1983, his team pulled off what might be considered the biggest upset in college basketball history. They made their way to the championship game. They shouldn't have even gotten there. But in that championship game, they came up against Houston University, Houston College, the Houston Cougars. They were one of the legendary teams in college basketball. Several players on that team not only went on to have pro careers, are today in the NBA, in the basketball Hall of Fame. No one believed that, forget about the fact that NC State would even win that game. They would be lucky to even keep it close. And on that night of the national championship game, in front of those 70, 80,000 people, NC State kept that game close the entire game. They got down to the last few seconds. Game was tied. And NC State threw up a half-court prayer. Clock was running out. Player threw up a shot from half court. It wasn't going to go in. It was falling off to the side of the basket. And Lorenzo Charles, a member of their team, grabbed the ball out of midair, in one motion, dunked it through the basket as the buzzer sounded, and NC State had pulled off the most improbable upset. They had won the national championship. The iconic image that is still showed until today, every time you watch college basketball broadcasts, in their intros or outros, they'll show this image, is Jim Valvano running onto the court with his arms spread wide. And as he explained later, in that moment, I was just looking for someone to hug, anyone that I could hug. Now, if you want to know how that happened, let me share with you a quote of Jim Valvano's. Jim Valvano said the following: He said, "My father gave me the greatest gift anyone can give another person. He believed in me." Now, here's his story. He was a teenager, and he realized as a teenager, although he loved basketball and was hoping to be a professional basketball player, he realized based on his skill set and everything, it wasn't going to happen. But he still wanted to be stay in the sport, so to say. So he decided, you know what, I'm going to try to be a coach. And he shared this vision with his father. The likelihood of becoming a basketball coach, there aren't that many jobs available. Many parents might have just said, listen, you know what, you can play basketball, you can have fun with your friends, you can watch basketball, but you know what, go to school, get a degree, pick out a career. Basketball is not likely to happen. But his father didn't tell him that. His father believed in him and let him know, go for that. You can do this. And so he did. And if you want to know what that belief from his father accomplished, at the age of 21, Jim Valvano was a head coach in college basketball. He coached the Rutgers University freshman team. The players on his team were 18 and 19 years old. He was only 2 years older than some of his players. That's what his father's belief caused. And then from there, he went on to become the head coach at NC State. And if you want to know how that night in 1983, how his team won the national championship, believe me, it wasn't because of their talent. Because if you took each individual player and put them up against their opponent that they were playing against that night, there wasn't a single player on the NC State team who was a better player than the player that he was playing against, not even one. But you know what Jim Valvano instilled in those players? The exact same thing that his father instilled in them. He believed in them. And they went on to the court that night with that belief. They knew that their coach believed that they could win that game. And they believed in themselves. And off they went. I want to share with you two stories from two other areas to sort of crystallize this point. One's about somebody else, and one's about somebody in my life again who did that for me. But first, let's talk about the other person. There's a name out there. Some of you may know who she is. Her name is Jennifer Botterill. Today, Jen Botterill is one of the lead analysts on what would be here in Canada on Sportsnet on the national hockey broadcast. Currently, with the Stanley Cup Finals going on, tonight's going to be Game 6. Jen Botterill is part of the panel with 3 or 4 other great hockey players as well, ex-hockey players or retired players. She's part of that panel. I believe she's the first woman to be part of that panel. She does the pregame and all the intermissions. But that's not only who Jen Botterill is. Well, first of all, in addition to that, she's a wife and a mother of 3 children. In addition to that, she is well known prior to her career as being a Sportsnet analyst for being one of the legendary players on the Canada women's national hockey team. She started her career first in college. She went to Harvard. Now, here's the thing to understand about Harvard. Many of the colleges in the United States, for the scholarship athletes that come to play in college basketball, football, and all the different sports that are there, they will lower their academic standards a bit for them, understanding that, of course, they're kind of doing 2 things. They have their studies plus their sports as well. So they will lower the academic standards. The Ivy League schools, the Harvards, the Yales, they don't do that. If you want to play college sports at Harvard, your marks have to be in line with anyone else trying to get into that school. They will not make an allowance because of sports. She got into Harvard. While there, she won what's called the Patty Kazmaier Award. That's the award given to the best women's college hockey player in all of college sports on a yearly basis. She didn't win it once, she won it twice. Oh, and while she was there, she also somehow found the time to graduate from Harvard with a psychology degree. She began playing hockey at the age of 13. Now, along that journey, here's what she accomplished as a member of Team Canada. She won 3 Olympic gold medals and 5 world championships. She began playing at 13 years old, kind of late for someone to sort of become really good or become that professional or to reach the level that she reached. But she started at 13. She was about 16 years old, about 2-3 years into her journey. Her father took her for lunch one day. And her father asked her a question during that lunch. Her father said, "What's your dream?" She thought about it for a moment and said, "You know what my dream is? 2002, 6 years from now, I want to be a member of Canada's women's national hockey team at the Olympic Games." Without missing a beat, her father looked back at her and said, 2002? Why not 1998? Now, to put it into context, The women's national hockey team, that Olympic team, is very well known here in Canada. They're really like celebrities. They just won the gold medal this past Olympic Games. Names like Marie-Philippe Poulin, Sarah Nurse, they are well known all across Canada at this point. But in 1996, that wasn't the case. Actually, the first time there was going to be women's Olympic hockey at the Olympics was going to be 1998. It had never been played before. The Nagano Games, 1998, first time. Jen Botterill was only 16 years old in 1996. She never even thought of 1998. She was just going to be turning 18 when those Olympics came around. What were the odds? She didn't even think about it. She set her dreams 4 years further for them. But in that moment, when her father took that dream and with his belief in her brought it 4 years earlier, he pulled it into the picture. Suddenly she said, you know what? Why not 1998? And off she went those next 2 years with her goal change now. I want to make that team in 1998. The odds were stacked against her. She hadn't been playing all that long. She was still really young, obviously. But you know what that belief led to? 2 years later, 1998, at the Nagano Games, Jen Botterill was the youngest member of Team Canada, and she won a silver medal. That's what belief accomplishes. Her father's belief in her put that goal and dream in her head and allowed her to believe in herself to then go accomplish what she did in 1998. Now, the stories we've talked about, of course, all these athletes, high performance athletes. So we might think, well, these people maybe are of a different breed, or maybe their makeup is kind of different than the typical regular person athlete like myself. So I want to share with you another story about myself to sort of bring it down to sort of what would be just the typical regular person type of level to show you what belief can cause there. So I was in grade 8. It was around February, March time. And in March, we were going to be taking our high school entrance exam. So February, all my friends and I, that was the time we were really studying and preparing for, kind of maybe set aside a lot of, the typical 8th grade fun stuff and hanging out with our friends sort of to really focus on that. And so in early March, I took that high school entrance exam. A few days later, I found out that I got into the school of my choice, and I was really excited. And at that point, after having worked so hard for those 4 weeks before, I guess I took my foot off the gas for a couple of weeks. And about 2 weeks after I took my foot off the gas and wasn't nearly as engaged in my studies as I usually was, we had a test. Now, I was generally a really good student through all my years in school. And on that test, on the day I got the test back, I looked at the mark and it said 67.5. Now, I had seen 7 and 6s on tests I had taken during my years in elementary and middle school, but they usually had a 9 before it, maybe an 8. I'd never seen the number 6 and 7 in combination on any test I'd ever taken. And that extra half point, 67.5, didn't do much to really make me feel better. I looked at the test. Obviously, I was really disappointed in myself. And of course, I had 2 thoughts. Oh no, my teacher's going to speak to me about this. That's going to be fun. And oh no, I'm going to have to show this test to my parents and I didn't get it signed. That's not going to be fun either. And sure enough, recess came along about an hour after we got the test back. And as we're about to go out to recess, teacher says, hey, Mark, can you stay behind a minute? Sure. Sat at my desk, everyone filed out, and he said, hey, can you please come up to the desk and bring the test with you? And I just, as I'm walking up, I'm saying to myself, okay, it's going to be 2 minutes. It's all going to be over. This too shall pass. It'll be okay. I come up to the desk. Teacher says, can you give me the test? I hand him the test. He takes the test from my hand. He rips it in half, crumples it up in a bowl, and throws it towards the wastebasket in the corner of the room. Swish. He looks at me and says, you want to know why I just did that? Because that test, that is not you. That test is not you. And he said, the reason why I threw it out, he said, I knew that if I left it in your hands, you're going to keep looking at it. You're going to keep looking at it. It's going to keep bothering you. And it's going to keep weighing on you. But you know what just happened? It's ripped up. It's thrown away. It never happened. It's not going in your mark book. You don't have to take it home to get it signed by your parents. My parents did not know about this story until I was in my late 20s. That test is not you. In that moment, what he was saying with those 4 words was, I know you. I know what you're capable of. I believe in that person. I believe in you. That test, that 67 app, this is not you. And now just go from there and keep being you. Well, what did that accomplish? Well, my very next test, my marks were back to, there might have been a 7 in it. I don't recall if there was a 7 or a 6 in it. I do recall that it was in the 90s. And after that, all my tests through the rest of that year and even through high school were back to my usual marks that I usually got all the way through. That moment, that this is not you, could have been a game changer. He could have called me up. He could have berated me. He could have given me a hard time. Believe me, I am sure he noticed during those previous weeks leading up to those tests, I wasn't nearly as dialed in as I was during other times. I'm sure he saw that. He didn't say one word about it. He didn't say one word about that mark. He took it, he ripped it up, he threw it away. He said, this is not you. I believe in you. And had he gone the other way, because believe me, when I got the test back, those thoughts start to creep in. Is this me? Maybe, I don't know, maybe. And those doubts and those lack of belief can really, we know the impacts that could have. And he wanted to be sure that I understood clearly from him that he believes in me and he knows exactly what I'm capable of. And that 67 app is not me. Goodbye, gone in the garbage, never see it again. This is not a story about an Olympic athlete. It's not a story about college basketball players winning a national championship. It's a story about a regular person, just me, with a teacher of mine doing that exact same thing that Jim Valvano did, that Jen Botterill's father did, that Jim Valvano's father did. If you believe, they'll achieve. If you believe in them, they'll believe in themselves. And once that happens, the sky's the limit of what they could achieve. And if we doubt that, if we're not sure, really, does that happen? Jim Valvano's father, 21 years old, became a head coach because his father believed in him. That's unheard of. Jim Valvano's team, the most improbable upset perhaps in college basketball history, because he believed in his players. Jen Botterill makes the Olympics at the age of 18 because of her father's belief in her, and as well as what my teacher did for me by believing in me. And at the end of that sentence, we're not done yet, is again, all of you, each and every one of you. That's what you do for these children every single day. When you are coaching them, you are instilling that other foundational principle belief, first as role models, and then believing in them. You put those two things together, and those children that you're coaching are well on their way to achieving all those wonderful things, just like the stories and all those different anecdotes that we just shared. That's our second foundational principle of coaching. Let's go to the third one. Third one is patience. The coach we're going to use for this is a coach by the name of Pat Summitt. Pat Summitt was the coach at Tennessee University, the Tennessee Volunteers, between the years of 1974 and 2012. She is to women's college basketball what John Wooden is to men's college basketball. The legendary men's basketball coach that John Wooden is, sort of on a Mount Rushmore of what would be coaches. Pat Summitt is that person in women's college basketball. Her record, interestingly enough, even more astounding than John Wooden's. 1,098 wins, 208 losses, a winning percentage of 84%. John Wooden, 81%. Pat Summitt, 84%. During her years as coach, as head coach, her Tennessee Volunteers won 8 national championships. And that John R. Wooden Legend of Coaches Award for Career Achievement, guess what? She actually won that in 2008. And as much as she was the great coach, similar to John Wooden, similar to Jim Valvano, wonderful person. She wasn't just the basketball coach. Yes, she demanded from her players to live up to their expectations, to get the most out of themselves. Of course, she did all that. But alongside that, she cared about each and every one of them, not just as a player, but as a person. Similar to John Wooden, her players kept in touch with her years after they left the school, consulting with her about everything, not just basketball. Similar to John Wooden, she was consulted by CEOs, by other leaders, wanting to hear her strategies, her ideas when it comes to leadership, when it comes to coaching. And similar to John Wooden, in 2012, by then President Barack Obama, she was also given the Presidential Medal of Freedom, again, the highest civilian honor granted in the United States. She became a head coach, similar to Jim Valvano, age of 22. He was 21, she was 22, really, really young. We're talking about patience, so I want to share a really interesting quote of hers about that. Here's her quote. 9/10 of discipline is having the patience to do things right. Again, 90%, 9/10 of discipline is having the patience to do things right. I want to talk about two sides. It's really two sides of the same coin, but I want to bring two ideas into that quote. Here's the first one. When you're coaching a child or a teenager, what you're trying to do is obviously teach them a technique, let them learn that technique, let them then start to do that technique, whatever it is. And then, of course, to ultimately, hopefully, develop a discipline. It sort of becomes them. They start to do it all the time. But there is a big difference from learning something, understanding something, doing it, to then have it become your discipline, something that it's almost like second nature, that you're just kind of doing it always. And to get to that point, there needs to be patience. The first thing she's sharing is, when you are working with that child, with that teen, you need to teach them as part of that, to be patient with themselves. Because it's very easy. Go back to my speech therapy. Can't master a technique. That's it. I'm done. I don't want to do this. I'm not doing any of this ever again. Very easy to do that. There needs to be that needs to be part of that. For the child or the teenager to develop that discipline on whatever technique that they're trying to master, you need to let them know to have patience with themselves. That's one side of that coin. And then there's the other side. And I'm going to use the word discipline loosely. The discipline idea when you're trying to discipline a child, but I don't mean here disciplining them because they're doing something wrong or they're misbehaving or anything like that. I mean the idea of trying to teach them something, right? To sort of teach them something that they might need to learn how to do a certain behavior, whatever those different things are. When you're doing that, not only do you have to teach the children to be patient with themselves, but you have to be patient with yourself. You need to have patience with them, even if you teach it to them, even if they understand it, even if they start doing it. It's going to take time for them to sort of let it become their second nature again. It's going to take time. They might slip up along the way. They might fall back along the way. They might not do it at certain times. You need to be patient with them. And those are the two sides of it. That 90% of achieving either of those ideas, which are really kind of all one, teaching the children to have patience with themselves and remembering to have patience with them as well. And the idea of this is that as you're doing this, and if you take those steps and you have that patience, ultimately, whatever you're trying to teach, because you're already their role model, as we talked about, and you've had that belief in them. And now if you just throw the patience on top of that, off they go. The sky's the limit of what they could achieve. Now, okay, similar to what we talked about before though, but does that really work? So I want to share with you a thought that probably her greatest player ever, that ever played for her. The greatest player that ever played for Pat Summitt, I think arguably would be a player named Candace Parker. Candace Parker played there, I believe, in the late 90s, early 2000s. She went on from there. She's still playing today. I believe she's 36 years old. She's still playing in the WNBA. She was the most sought after high school recruit, maybe ever. That's how great she was when she was in high school. Every university wanted Candace Parker to play for them. She then went on from there to win 2 national championships while she was in college. She's won 2 championships in the WNBA, including this past year at the age of 35 or 36, led her team, the Chicago Sky, to the WNBA championship. And Candace Parker, as much as she is known for her basketball, she is also as well known for the person she is. She does so much off the court, between helping out with causes, speaking to children, teenagers all over the place. She is as loved as she is for the person she is, as she is for the basketball player she is. In 2012, sadly, Pat Summitt developed early onset Alzheimer's, I think in her early 60s, right around 60 years old. And she retired from basketball, from coaching basketball at that point, and 4 years later, she passed away. On the day she passed away, Candace Parker put out this tweet. I want to read it to you. In that tweet, she shared a note that Pat Summitt had handwritten to her when she was trying to recruit her to come to play at Tennessee University when she was still in high school. Candace Parker Pat Summitt had come to watch Candace Parker play a game and left her this handwritten note that all these years later, Candace Parker still had. I want to read you first the note, and then I want to read you what Candace Parker wrote above that note in her tweet. Here's the note. Candace, I enjoyed watching you play again. Makes me want very badly to coach you and see you on the court with the Lady Vols. You truly are a special athlete in quotations. And it's clear to me that you love the game. You will be an impact player, those words, be an impact player, underlined, wherever you go. If you come to Tennessee, you will also have thousands of fans watch you every time you step on the court. Our fans would love your game. Candace, I think I could help you on and off the court. I would do my best to help you develop as a player, person, and student. We could have lots of fun in the process. Think about it. I want to be your coach, Pat Summitt. I want to pull one sentence out of that entire beautiful note that she wrote. She said, I want to help you develop and become the best you can be as a player, person, and student. Yes, of course, she's the head basketball coach at Tennessee. She wants Candace Parker, the player, to be on her team without question. But she also wasn't just interested in Candace Parker, the player. Pat Summitt was interested in Candace Parker, the person and student. And the word she wrote is, I want to help you develop. Well, developing doesn't happen overnight. Remember the days when, not that long ago, but it seems like it was long ago, when we had to develop our film, right? Remember those days before the digital stuff? So we had to take our film, drop it off at the camera place, and they said, okay, come back in 5 days. And you wanted to see those pictures right now from that trip you were just on, and they said, come back next week. It takes time to develop something. But she was telling Candace Parker, yeah, I'm going to develop you. Patience. The word patience and develop are inextricably linked, because without patience, there is no developing. And she wasn't just there to develop her as a player, as a person, and as a student. That was the note that Candace Parker shared. But here is what Candace Parker wrote above that note that she shared with everyone on the day that Pat Summitt had passed away. You held true to your promises, ... and some. Thank you, Coach. Coach in capital C. That's how much she respected Pat Summitt. Capital C with the word coach. Thank you, Coach, for always being the perfect role model. I love you. #RIP. That's Candace Parker was telling us that Pat Summitt had lived up to that promise. I want to develop you as a person, as a player, as a student. That does not happen overnight. That's patience. And this was not a relationship where Candace Parker was there for 4 years, left Tennessee, and never spoke to her coach again. She always went back. You would see her at games even. Always went back. Always spoke. Always consulted with Pat Summitt. Actually would come back and speak to the current players to motivate them, to talk to them. Years after she had left, and people all over the country. She's well known for that. That's what patience accomplishes. It's easy to give a quote and say, yeah, discipline, patience. Anyone can give a quote. Pat Summitt didn't give a quote. She lived the quote. With that quote, she was telling us how she lived her life and how she practiced her coaching with her players. Yes, as much as she wanted to win, and as driven as she was to try to get her players to win and to try to have them feel that same drive, in all that was the patience as well. It didn't just happen by accident, or it didn't happen just by driving them hard and being hard on them. Patience. Pat Summitt was patience with her players. And at the end of that sentence, again, YOU, each and every one of you are patient with all those children that you coach every single day. And that's how it all works. We've talked about the 3 principles: role model, belief, and patience. Well, think of it in this way. Role model is kind of like planting the seeds. As I talked about, opening the door. The children will open the door if you're the role model. So how does that work? Well, right, you open the ground, you put in that seed. That's what being the role model accomplishes. Belief, that's like watering that seed. You water that seed with belief. But after you water that seed, it takes time for it to grow. And how does it grow? The sunlight comes in. And eventually, that plant, that tree, that flower, whatever it is, it grows, it blossoms, it becomes something beautiful. Sunlight, that's the patience. With all those children that you coach, if you seed it with that role model, being that role model, if you water it with belief in them, and then you give it that sunlight with the patience that you tell them to have with themselves and the patience that you have with them, what that becomes is something absolutely beautiful. Something that will grow not just in front of your eyes while you're coaching them, which you'll get to see that, but then for years and years and years later, continues to grow. All those stories that we talked about, all those people, the Jen Botterill, the Candace Parkers, It's not just what they wore when they might have left that period of their life. It's what they've continued to be because of the role model, the belief, and the patience that those people in their life represented to them. And that's exactly what you are doing, and you're representing to every single one of the children that you coach. I want to close, if I may, with two things, if you'll indulge me, 2 points. I mentioned earlier, we're going to come back to Jim Valvano. So I want to tell you about Jim Valvano, something that he did that goes far beyond what he accomplished in basketball. Jim Valvano left coaching around the late 1980s and became the lead basketball analyst at ESPN, which is the station in the US that is the biggest in terms of broadcasting college basketball. He was beloved as a college basketball analyst, as he was a coach. Great personality, everyone loved him. Early 1990s, unfortunately, he got cancer. And he lived his battle very publicly. He continued to coach basketball games. He continued to announce basketball games, to be that lead analyst while he was going through all his treatments, and was inspiring so many people by sharing his story as he went through that battle. Today, there is something out there called the ESPY Awards. These are awards which are run by ESPN. They're sports awards. They have them once a year in July. They're a huge deal at this point. Sort of like if you think of the Academy Awards for like movies and the Grammys for music, well, the ESPY Awards are the same thing for sports. They're done in huge arenas today. Everyone is there, not just the sports athletes, but celebrities. Everyone is there. It's like a sort of one of these events where you want to be at. Those ESPY Awards began in the early 1990s. And as part of those ESPY Awards, they created what was called the Arthur Ashe Courage Award. Arthur Ashe was an African-American tennis player who ascended to the top of the tennis game, won major championships. I believe he was even ranked #1 in the world at certain points. But unfortunately, in the late 1980s, mid-80s, when the AIDS epidemic was just beginning to happen, he contracted HIV, the AIDS virus, through a blood transfusion that he had gotten during a routine medical procedure. And unfortunately, a couple of years after that, he passed away. Now, Arthur Ashe wasn't just a great tennis player. He was well known out there promoting all kinds of causes, social causes, children, youth. He was really well known throughout his career for that. And so after he passed away, ESPN, as part of the ESPY Awards, decided they were going to create the Arthur Ashe Courage Award and give that out every year to someone that exemplifies that courage, what Arthur Ashe exhibited. And so in 1993, they decided to give that award to Jim Valvano. Now, when they said he was going to get that award at the ESPYs, they weren't sure even he was going to be able to make it because of his battle with cancer. He wasn't feeling that well. But he did show up that night, and he needed help to get up on the stage. And once he got up there, he delivered a 10-minute speech, one of the iconic speeches, not just sports speeches, pretty much anywhere. Pretty much that's what everyone agrees about that speech. If you want to go watch the speech, it's 10 minutes. It'll change your life. You'll laugh, you will cry, you will be inspired. You can go to YouTube, and you could just put in Jimmy V. ESPY speech, Jimmy V, capital V, ESPY, capital ESPY speech. You'll have many choices to choose from that will show you that speech. Towards the end of that speech, Jim Valvano shared that on that night, him together with ESPN, who was putting in the original seed money for it, were creating the Jimmy V Foundation for Cancer Research. To date, the Jimmy V Foundation for Cancer Research has raised over $250 million for cancer research. It is one of the largest cancer research foundations in the entire world. There are treatments that were developed by those money that was raised by the Jimmy V Foundation that have saved countless lives, including just a few years ago, there was another well-known sports celebrity, announcer actually, who got the same award, and on the stage shared that she's a cancer survivor and she's alive today. At that speech, she shared it because of money that was raised by the Jimmy V Foundation that created a treatment that saved her life. And it saved countless of other lives as well. And that night, as Jimmy V then shared that, he then ended his speech with 7 iconic words. Those words were, don't give up, don't ever give up. If you go to the Jimmy V Foundation for Cancer Research website, right under the name of the foundation, it is there in quotations. That has become their mission statement, their mantra, their anthem, their theme. Those 7 words, don't give up, don't ever give up, have inspired millions of people throughout the world over the last 30 years. Not just people battling cancer, not just people battling other diseases, but all kinds of people, whatever their challenges or struggles are, whatever they might be going through in their life at certain points. Those 7 words, don't give up, don't ever give up, have continued and continue to inspire so many people. And if we talk about what we do here as coaches, we talked about being the role model, we talked about believing in them, we talked about having patience with them when you're coaching children. But if you wrap all that in the blanket of don't give up, don't ever give up, then it's all going to really, really happen. Because when you don't give up on a child, they won't give up on themselves. But when they're standing out there and they feel that, there's no one there, there's nothing, there sort of isn't that something to grab onto, it can become really lonely, really scary for any child, for any teenager. But when they feel that from you, that idea of don't give up, don't ever give up, you express that to them. They feel that from you. They have what to hold on to. That will inspire them and they will not give up on themselves. Those 7 words echo not just, as I said, for someone who might be battling a disease, but even here, what we do every day, if you bring that don't give up, don't ever give up mindset to all that you do with your coaching and you wrap it around those 3 core principles that we talked about, great things can happen. One more thing, if I may. I started this talk that we had by saying my hope was that to give all of you the picture of what you do every day, for you to get to see that. And I hope I've done that. But I want to share with a specific image involving children that will paint that to sort of really bring it to life, hopefully. There's a school out there in Staten Island, New York, called PS22. PS22 has a music teacher by the name of Mr. B. Well, he has a name, but affectionately known as Mr. B. He is the 5th grade music teacher at PS22. And you're probably wondering, how does Mark know about PS22 in Staten Island, New York? And it's not because I happen to live in the New York area at some point. But the reason is this PS22, that music class, has become world famous. You see, Mr. B would do these music performances with the kids. Now, what he does with the music is really interesting. These are not kids that are necessarily with the best voices. Whoever's in grade 5 that wants to be part of that music class is welcome to join. And he encourages them to sing. And he encourages them to sing from their depths, bring out their pain. There's no choreography in any of their singing. He encourages them to move freely and feel the music. There's no set choreography. He's a wonderful teacher, a wonderful person. But the reason why I know about them and the reason why the world knows about them is because in 2007, 2008, someone encouraged Mr. B to take one of their performances and put it up on YouTube, in the early days of YouTube. And so he did. And these performances started to go viral. So viral that all these other famous singers would actually come down to PS22 to sing with them. Because here's what Mr. B did very different than a lot of the sort of old-fashioned music teachers. They weren't singing these classics from the 40s and 50s. No, he sang current songs with them. Songs that the kids were their songs, the songs that they felt, the songs of the day, the songs that were famous right at that time. Those are the songs that he did with them. And so all these singers who started to see all their performances on YouTube, we're talking millions of views. I mean, some of these performances had 8, 9, 10 million views. And every year it's a different group of kids because grade 5 moves on and now it's a new group. It's not this choir that's stayed together all these years. But these performances started to get out there. And these singers started to hear about it. Famous singers came down to PS22 in Staten Island, New York to sing their song together with this grade 5 PS22 music class. Some of the most famous ones, like Carrie Underwood, like Katy Perry, most famous singers of our generation, those are coming down to sing with these children. And in 2011, the Academy Awards, the Oscars, came to PS22 to let them know that they will fly them out to California. They want PS22 Chorus, that year's group, to perform the final number at the Academy Awards. And in front of that audience of a who's who of Hollywood, with millions, maybe billions of people watching worldwide on television, they closed out the show with a performance of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. The next morning, although there were all the awards given, all the famous actors and actresses and acceptance speeches, that's not what everyone was talking about. The whole world was talking about those kids from Staten Island, New York, PS 22, had literally stolen the show. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is I want to share with you a specific song, a specific performance that they did. There's a singer out there by the name of Andy Grammer. He's quite well known. He's put out several albums. And a few years ago, he actually created a song. There was a movie. I believe it was the director of the movie was a good friend of his. And I've never seen the movie, but the movie was about two people going through, I believe, cystic fibrosis and how they meet in the hospital and that whole journey between them. And he asked Andy Grammer, his friend, if he could write what would be the theme song for that movie. And so he did. The song is called Don't Give Up on Me. It came out about 3-4 years ago. It's a song that's a beautiful song because it's really a two-sided song. If you listen to the words of the song talks about not giving up on yourself, believing in yourself, and at the same time, the juxtaposition of believing in others. It's a beautiful song. It's an upbeat kind of a song. And that too has become an anthem for so many people out there. If you go to YouTube and read the comments under anywhere where that song might be, yes, it's people might be going through certain illnesses, but it's also all kinds of people with their struggles in their life commenting how that song has gotten them through that day, through that period, to the next moment in their life, simply hearing that song and the message of that song. And so Andy Grammer came in about 3 years ago to perform this song together with the PS 22 chorus. And they put out a video of it. That has almost 10 million views. He performed the song with them. It's about a 4-minute clip. And at the end of it, he literally has tears in his eyes and tells them, this is the best day of my life. This is the most beautiful way I've ever done this song, with me singing it, with the chorus of the kids in the background, singing with all the harmonies and everything that was going on. He literally said, it's the best day of my life. If you want to see this performance, again, you'll be moved by it. And it's not just Andy Grammer singing his song, it's with the kids that really makes it so powerful. Again, you can go to YouTube and you can just put in the search, Don't Give Up on Me, Andy Grammer, spelled Grammer, featuring FT period PS 22 chorus. You put in any combination of those words, it will come up. As I said, don't give up on me. That's exactly what we're talking about here. The role model, the belief, the patience. But those children, any child that you're coaching, and whatever they might have gone through till now, whether it's in school or other areas socially within their life, the struggles, the challenges they're having, all they want is someone to understand them, to believe in them, to not give up on them. The moment they feel that you're not giving up on them, they won't give up on themselves. They will continue to fight just like you're fighting. They'll take your fight. You're their role model. They'll mirror your fight. If they see you fighting for it, they'll fight equally as hard for it. Don't give up on me. Those words are so powerful. Now, I want to share one more thing about PS 22 that I didn't share till now. PS 22 is a school in an area of Staten Island, unfortunately, where it's an underprivileged area, a lot of underprivileged students coming from all kinds of challenging backgrounds and home lives and all kinds of situations. Mr. B is not just your typical teacher that kind of, he teaches them and believes in the kids. It's a whole different level. He literally builds these children. He understands the backgrounds they come from. He instills confidence. He instills belief in them. He encourages them to be the best of themselves. And if you want to see what that happens, what that is about, well, let's talk about it. Being the role model. There was a documentary that was done. I believe it's called It's a Lullaby. But if you Google it, you'll find it. They did a documentary around that Academy Awards ceremony, or that song that they were going to do. And it started a few months before, the whole lead up through it and right through it. And in that documentary, there's many poignant moments, but one of them is he comes in on the first day of school. And there's 2 students waiting for him as he comes in into the lobby, who literally go running to him to hug him. These are not students who are in school anymore. They're older now. Grade 5 is the highest grade. They then move on. They're in another school now. But they came back on the first day of school just to see Mr. B, just to give him a hug. And there he is talking to them and saying, hey, how's it going? Are you guys still doing music? I'm so happy to hear you are. You see, that's the role model. They've left the school. They're gone. And here they are coming back on the first day of school. I didn't get a chance maybe to see him over the summer, just to be able to see him, say hi, and give him a hug. The belief in them. There's many conversations around that documentary. You hear him talking with the children, the belief he's instilling in them, the confidence he's putting into them. And then there's the patients. These children, as I said, come from a lot of underprivileged backgrounds. There is a scene in that documentary where one of the girls of that PS22 course during that year that they were going to do that Academy Awards performance, who unfortunately got expelled from school. She had done a couple of things and got expelled from school. And Mr. B went to bat for her. And he talks about in the documentary how I begged and I pleaded with the principal to take her back. And he literally has tears in his eyes as he's explaining this. He said, because these kids, right? Where's she going to be a couple of years from now? We got to take her back. And so the principal listened to his pleading and took her back in. Role model, belief, patience. It's unbelievable. Yes, the songs, the singing, the harmonies are inspiring to watch. But at the same time, it's also what he is as a person. As everyone says, whether it's in that documentary, everyone always talks about how, man, Carrie Underwood says to them, man, I wish I had that music teacher when I was a kid. Everyone needs a Mr. B in their life. Everyone needs a Mr. B in their life. Well, guess what? That's every single one of you. I said I wanted to give you that image. And I'm trying to end it by just saying, take out the name Mr. B and put in each of your names instead. That's you. That's what you do for these children. We know the children that we're working with here. They've had their challenges. They've had their struggles in school, socially, all those aspects. It's been a challenge for them. Maybe no one got them. Maybe no one really understood them. No one was that role model. No one believed in them. No one really had that patience with them. And here you come, walking in the door. You become their role model. You believe in them. You have patience with them. You don't give up on them. And you become their Mr. B. That's exactly what you become with every single child that you are coaching. And like I said, it's not just today. It's not just for the months that you're coaching them. This will change their life forever. Generations are changed because of what you do with your coaching. You are their Mr. B. That's who you are, every single one of you. And like I said, where you are down in the trenches, maybe it's hard to see that. And there's also, we don't look at ourselves, hey, I'm great. That's not how we tend to view ourselves, because we got a great group of coaches here that are as great as they are as coaches, equally humble. So none of you probably see yourself that way. But I wanted to hopefully, in this time that we spent here, give you that image, allow you to see yourself through the lens of all the people that we shared. And every day as you're about to coach one of those children, for 1 second, just remind yourself, yeah, you know who I am? I'm John Wooden. I'm Penny Watson. I'm Jim Valvano's father. I'm Jim Valvano. I'm Jen Botterell's father. I'm Mark's teacher. I'm Pat Summit. I'm Mr. B. That's who you are every single day. And see what those people accomplished and are accomplishing. And that's exactly what you're doing every single day. I just want to thank all of you. This has been an honor, a pleasure, a treat to be able to address you, and that you've allowed me to. You people don't need to learn anything from me. Not on the technical aspects of coaching, not on the foundational principles of coaching. There's nothing I can teach any of you. So I didn't stand up here today and say, hey, I'm going to teach the coaches how to coach. If anything, the opposite. I would give anything to speak to any one of you and I'll be able to pick any of your brains to learn from you. So I wasn't going to get up here and say, hey, I'm going to teach you guys. No. What I was hoping to do was to give you the image of what you are. All those wonderful people that we talked about. You are, every single one of you are those people. Keep doing what you do. Keep changing lives. Keep changing generations. Thank you so much for listening to me for as long as you have. This was such a pleasure and a treat. Thank you so much.